Okay, so I just saw Elemental, and many other people seem to have agreed with me. Yeah, because I think this movie has, as of now, one of, if not the worst opening box office performances for any Pixar movie ever made, which, honestly, I can kind of see why. Most reactions people had to like the teaser and the trailer were stuff where either this doesn't look very good or it looks fine but nothing great. And yeah, I was kind of on the fence about it, but a lot of Pixar movies usually don't have the best trailers, like Inside Out and Soul. A lot of people were like, yeah, these look good, but they don't look that great, and then the movies turned out to be really good. So I was hoping Elemental would at least be decent. And overall thoughts on this movie were, yeah, it was alright. Not great, but not terrible. Like, I think most people seem to be pretty middle of the road. Either they like it fine enough or they don't like it enough. I'm definitely in the enjoy category, but I don't think it's anything great. Of the few Pixar movies I've seen, I think this might be the weakest one, but to be fair, I haven't seen a lot of, like, the more infamous ones. Like, I haven't seen Brave, I haven't seen The Good Dinosaur, I haven't even seen Lightyear. I've seen parts of Cars 2, but yeah, so me saying this is the weakest Pixar movie I've seen isn't really that low of a bar. Of course, this movie follows in the traditional Pixar formula of what if blank had feelings, and this time we have elements. It takes place in a world where people are all composed of one of the four main elements: fire, water, earth, and air, and it mainly follows a family of fire people who move from like their fire homeland to Element City, and they begin to run a shop called the Fireplace, which I honestly can't tell if I love or hate that name. But yeah, it mainly follows the daughter of this family, a girl named Ember, who her father wants her to eventually grow up and take over the business so he can retire. And we see her grow up and like start to learn how to manage the store, but the main issue that she has with being able to run the store is her temper. She gets very, very angry at like rude and annoying customers, and if anyone out there has worked customer service, you know that is the last possible thing that you want to do. So, and of course with her being made of fire, every time she gets really angry, she like literally explodes. And that brings me to one of the first things I want to talk about with this movie that I think a lot of other people have been talking about, and it's kind of like, I guess, like the world building or like the design or abilities of these different characters. Like, some things you see are actually kind of clever. Like, there's one scene where a woman is like feeding a fire baby, but instead of using like a baby bottle or whatever, she like feeds it lighter fluid. That's kind of clever. But then you also have stuff like an Earth guy who's like running the immigration thing. He has like this big stump-like nose, and he uses that as a stamp. Like, okay, that's it? That's all you really had? Or later on, we see a sport called airball being playing, and yeah, it's basically just basketball. There's nothing too unique about it, so yeah, that was one of my bigger... I can say that's one of my gripes with this movie, is that the world building could have been a little stronger, but that in tangent leads me into what is without a doubt the best thing about this movie, the animation. Holy shit, this is one of the best one of the best looking Pixar movies ever. It looks gorgeous. There was so much detail put into both the environments, the background stuff, and especially the characters, their movement, like the little flickers and the flames, or the movement in the water and stuff, the little particles in the air, the seeds and stuff on the Earth characters. Like, it looks absolutely amazing. I can see why this is one of the most expensive Pixar movies ever, because, yeah, they definitely put all they had into the animation. Unfortunately, they didn't really put as much of it into the script. Going back to the story, on like their biggest sale day of the year, Ember once again tries to keep it in, but she eventually gets too fed up with the customers, so she winds up storming down into the basement and having a giant outburst that is so big it ends up rupturing the pipe, and a water guy named Wade like floods in or whatever, because he was just like traveling along through the pipes, which, okay, yeah, that's kind of funny. But of course, because there's like issues with the pipe and stuff, and possibly not under like health code violations or whatever, Wade is forced to write up a report to shut down the place, so Ember tries to go stop him. And to make a long story short, that gets pretty much resolved, I'd say, about halfway through the movie. I know, mild spoilers or whatever, but like I said, it's not that big a deal. I think most people know that something like that's not gonna happen. The biggest thing that was advertised with this movie is Ember and Wade, like how they meet, they form a bit of a connection to each other, and eventually form some sort of relationship, despite the number one rule of Element City being elements don't mix, especially fire and water, because, you know, they extinguish and evaporate each other. And The most common consensus I saw with this movie is people were worried that this was all the movie was going to be. This was going to be like the primary focus of it, just like your standard, typical Romeo and Juliet story or whatever about forbidden lovers, but in the end, the prejudice is broken or whatever, and everyone realizes, oh, they can be together. And yes, that is an element, but I'd say that's only about half of the main focus. As a whole, like, the way it handles this kind of stuff, for the most part, is fine. It's nothing groundbreaking or all, like, obviously, Ember's father or whatever is very prejudiced against water people and stuff, but yeah, no, he's gonna learn to come around eventually, and Ember and Wade will eventually get together, etc. and stuff. And they have fairly solid chemistry with each other. Like, I wouldn't say they're one of the best fictional couples I've ever seen, but they're alright. They have a decent relationship with one another. The only issue I really had is, well, Ember, I think, is a very likable protagonist. Like, you can really understand where she's coming from and, like, how she wants to impress her father and stuff. Wade kind of got annoying at points. One of his main joke or whatever is that he's overly emotional and he cries a lot. And yeah, there were moments where it was kind of funny, but there were a lot of moments where I was just kind of like rolling my eyes or whatever. Like, yeah, okay, we get it. Can we have some other sort of joke now? Their relationship isn't exactly the main theme or whatever. I'd say the main theme of this movie is the idea of like what you should do with your life. Mainly like doing what's expected of you versus doing what you want to do. This is probably Ember's main struggle throughout the movie. And again, it's done decently, but it's not really anything unique. Like, we've seen this kind of stuff done before in a lot of other various pieces of media, even a few by Pixar. Like, Soul kind of tackled with that a bit. So, yeah, it's done alright, but it's nothing great. I think that's the main takeaway from this movie, is that while there are some really great elements in there, like the animation and the character designs are really cool, the story and the script and stuff are not bad, but they're not that great either. Another big issue is the movie isn't very funny, but not necessarily because it's like, you know, so many bad jokes or whatever that are being thrown, you're just like, oh, shut up already. No, there are barely any jokes in this movie at all, and the few that are there, some of them might get a slight chuckle here and there, but for the most part it's just kind of whatever. The only one that got like a decent laugh out of me was the one in the trailer, where they're like standing in front of this fence, and they literally just walk right through it, because Wade slips through the cracks and Ember just burns through it, and then Wade just goes, why do they even have this? Like, that was a good joke. I would have liked to see some more stuff like that, but sadly you don't get too much of it. Most of it is either just kind of whatever, or you might get a slight chuckle, but you just forget about it immediately. Now, mild spoilers here, but this is only until, like, what, the halfway point of the movie, so the main way they try and resolve the issue with the store and stuff is apparently there's the fire area of the city is at risk of being flooded by, like, overflow of water and stuff, so they fix it, and the way they fix it is actually kind of clever. They, like, get all these sandbags, and Ember uses her, like, fire body to melt the sand into glass, and she does this with a few things in the movie, and that is another thing that I think is really cool. Just, not only do I think it's a kind of a clever idea, but also just, again, the way it's animated and stuff looks absolutely fantastic. Honestly, the most disappointing part of this movie is the fact that I feel like it could have been a lot better, because there are some interesting ideas in here. Like I said, the whole elements don't mix. The idea of a couple that cannot physically touch each other and stuff is an interesting idea. I really feel like there's some places you could go with something like that, but I won't give it away, but they really do not do anything. It's just kind of like brushed to the side, like, again, like 2/3 into the movie. And sadly, the climax is a bit underwhelming, because they do a lot of the cliches you would see in a movie like this. Like, they do the third act breakup, they do like the fake out death where they're like, oh no, this character's gone, oh nope, they're actually back. Yeah, we've seen this a million times already, we don't need to see it again. So, and even then the stakes aren't really that big. Like, again, I won't give it away, I won't go into too much detail, but for the most part I was like, yeah, nah, I know exactly what's gonna happen here, they're gonna be totally fine. And thankfully, the ending of the movie does give a nice, heartwarming moment between Ember and her father. Again, won't spoil it, but there is a very nice moment you see with them and, like, Wade and stuff. So, overall, this movie was decent, but I can see why people would find it pretty underwhelming. I was kind of on the fence of what I should give it on, like, a scale of 1 to 10. I would probably give it a 6, but again, the animation is genuinely so good. I think I'm gonna push it up to a 7. So, the movie was alright. I can see why it seems to be underperforming, because it's nothing groundbreaking, but if you are curious, I'd say it's a solid enough watch. Elemental earns a 7 out of 10.